think just like backing it up to your first point about just this whole idea of anything gender affirming being politicized, like trans people have always existed. What has shifted is the visibility around transness. And I'd argue that trans people and gender diverse people are almost hyper visible right now, which is, in the context of our society, it's dangerous. And we're seeing a lot of that play out, even just in terms of, the fact that media outlets with as much like legitimacy and power as the New York Times can publish pieces that are just completely inaccurate and poorly researched and not even representative of a real issue is, I think, just speaks to how prolific that bias is. And every single one of us, I think, has this bias towards like inherently wanting to reinforce a binary view of gender and also sexuality, because we all grew up in that world, and that's kind of what was like beat into us from the second that, gosh, even before we were born, we were like assigned some arbitrary color. So it's really hard to kind of have to deconstruct those ideas that people are so like deeply rooted and attached to. Many of the reasons why like gender identity and transness has been politicized is because politicians really are just failing in so many ways. Like, people can't afford to like buy a house anymore. Like, no one can get a job that like makes ends meet. And they're just taking this issue and trying to take the most marginalized group of people and sort of create this like rallying point around like hate projected towards them, and to like miscast the way that people are feeling in this country right now, and like making transness and like gender identity the problem. It's just like really pathetic. It's weak, but it shocks me that people just can't see that because they're just getting so roped into it. But y'all are being played. I don't know. Well, and like anti-transness is almost being used now as this vehicle, to sort of bring everything back that's like sort of associated with that like level of conservatism, and like abortion is one example, but even a lot of the recent sort of reaction to, the whole like, I don't know if you know the Balenciaga like campaign with like the kids in the ads with these like teddy bear backpacks, and there's some like BDSM ties to it. Like, there's all kinds of problems with it, but some of the discussion around it, and then even like other ads that are being pulled from like many years ago, it's almost giving like satanic panic vibes, with like a lot of just like the reaction or like the narrative being assigned to things. It's just very, it's just interesting to see like it escalate so quickly and everyone just kind of not see what's happening. I think a lot of the coverage from the Times in regards to just anything trans this year has really been this like manufactured divisiveness. It's always been, well, let's find like one positive trans story, and let's find someone with like regret or detransition, and let's frame it as this like 50-50 debate, as if there's equal merit to both sides, and that's supposed to be representative of the trans experience, which is so manipulative in itself in sort of the ideas that it's perpetuating to society. The other key thing is none of the people that have written or done any of the investigations for these articles are actually trans themselves or have any like meaningful experience with the trans community, which is kind of atypical in a lot of coverage of things. So that in itself, I think, is also an issue that people should be paying attention to. But that article in particular, was guilty of the same things. It kind of took three people's stories and it really just focused on some potential risk and did not discuss any of like the massive benefits or all of the evidence supporting these treatments. And really just was like another piece that's just going to fearmonger, and to people that don't know better or have context, you're going to read that and completely leave with a misconstrued understanding of what's happening for care for youth. And I think, especially like in this day and age, and Chase Strangio is always putting out like fire tweet threads about this. There's just been no accountability for a lot of the journalists that are writing pieces that are literally sometimes being used in the court of law and being like called into evidence. And they're like actively harming the trans community, and the trans community, as well as GLAAD and a bunch of other organizations that I've also interacted with, have like explicitly communicated to them that this has been wrong. And I think a lot of grace has been extended sort of time and time again, like trying to educate behind the scenes, trying to redirect, trying to suggest alternative sort of sources and opinions. But again, they're sort of pandering to that like manufactured divisiveness and trying to take this like political correctness approach because it's this politicized issue, and not like ostracize anyone on either side. But it really is extremely damaging and dangerous. I would recommend everyone, if you listen to this podcast, just Google WPATH or USPATH, pubertal suppression statement, because they wrote an amazing sort of critical analysis of that article and talk about what the evidence actually is, and then really make a lot of points about, again, like this is like the kind of premier media outlet in the world, and they're using experts that don't even see trans patients. That's insane. So you have like, you're quoting people that don't even have any clinical experience dealing with a group of people. So the whole thing is just wrong on so many levels, and these reporters are smart people, like they understand what they're doing. And there's a lot of us in these spaces that have been interviewed for these types of pieces, right? But we're never quoted. And if we are, it's in some way that is kind of used to just prop up the negative counterpoint. I've actually stopped interviewing for a lot of those pieces because I don't want to allow myself to be like used as a platform to just sort of display anti-trans jargon. Like they're just using us for balance to say what they really want to say. So I think a lot of us have clued in and are just kind of done with it.